thank you everybody for joining our panel, last panel of the conference, and a very important topic, diversity, equity and inclusion in the space sector. My name is Dr. Sheila Goff-Kenyon. I'm really proud to be part of the National Committee for the Australian Space Diversity Alliance. We're very new. We're really trying to do some good in the industry. Our purpose really is to increase and improve the participation of marginalised groups in the space industry. And we're really happy to be joined today by some great speakers and to have had the support of the Andy Thomas Space Foundation in supporting this panel. So you're going to hear today from Asha Stabback, from Michelle Lyon-Green, from Chris Lawerence, from Zoe Janes, and from Dwayne Fernandez. If you would like to please, panel, take a seat. Our esteemed speakers will each get an opportunity first to share their stories with us. So we are going to hear from each individually, and they'll be able to share some of their stories and experiences.
Excellent, thank you. I just wanted to pay my respects to the Kaurna, I think it's the Kaurna people, the land in which we meet. I'm joining you I've come across from Whadjuk Noongar land over in Perth. So my name's Asha Stabback. In my professional capacity, I'm the Translation and Impact Manager for ICRAR, the International Centre for Radio Astronomy Research. I'm also the chair of our our Development Equity and Inclusion Committee, and also on the advisory committee for the industry engagement side of AAL as well. But besides my professional capacity, I'm the mother to a very active 16-year-old boy. I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, I'm a friend, and I've always been a really passionate, advocate for where I've seen injustice in the world. As a child, I was regularly up, meeting with the principal to speak to them about whatever I felt was really, not fair, or if someone was treated in a way that I wasn't happy about. And I think it wasn't until I went to university that I started to realise the privilege that I actually had, that I was someone who was listened to, that I was empowered to actually be able to have those conversations and challenge people that were in positions of authority that others may not have had the courage to go and speak to. However, once I entered into the work environment, I started to see that maybe, particularly being a female, that my voice wasn't heard as often as what I had had in the past as well. Also at university, I started to realise quite how privileged I actually was when one of my fellow students shared with me that they were on a scholarship, and I was like, well, what is that? And when they shared the amount of money that their family earns in a year, and hence why they were needing a scholarship, in my mind, I couldn't even fathom how they survived. I was like sort of a drop compared to what, the family earned. And that really gave me the sort of the doorway to speak to my parents around, well, hang on, what are we actually doing? What are we giving back to? And understanding and appreciating the community mindedness of my family as well. So I take those values through with me throughout my career. Back in 2016, I was a co-founder of Bub Desk, which was a co-working space with a creche that we established in Perth. Particularly, the challenges for parents when they've got young children and trying to transition and balance returning to the workforce. I wish that sort of service had been available when I first had my child. And so, in the end, we couldn't make that sustainable. It's always a challenge with a startup. However, what I like to see is a ripple of change that we're actually influenced, with many larger companies based over in Perth now actually having creche and facilities and childcare on site within their buildings. And this was not just a childcare, but a creche, so that more occasional care. So, I think for me, it's always seeing where you can actually make that little ripple of change and what things that you can actually do. So as I said, in my professional capacity, I'm at ICRAR. We're based over in Perth. We're a joint venture between Curtin and the University of WA. We have astronomers based across both of our nodes, so quite a strong science focus. And then we also have engineering, astrophotonics, data, as well. So we've got quite a broad spectrum of researchers as well as students. I joined ICRAR last year in April, and what really struck me was how inclusive the work environment is. I can't take credit for the culture that they've actually enabled that is there, but what I really do appreciate is the way that people can be themselves and bring their full selves to work, and celebrate the things that make them unique and what's important to them as well. So I have been able to lead our impact area in terms of Indigenous engagement and exploring what that can look like. And there's others that have bring their cultural and linguistic diversity, and from an accessibility perspective as well. One of my colleagues that sits on one side is deaf, a colleague that sits on the other side is blind, yet they, you wouldn't even know. And they're able to have like a really fulfilling, work and contribute and things like that, and we don't even see those disabilities at all. Some of the things that we do from an education perspective, so just giving a little bit of a plug, because this key part is making space accessible for all. So we run a series of different programs from a community perspective. We have AstroFest once a year. It's the biggest astronomy-related festival in the Southern Hemisphere. Sidewalk astronomy. We take the telescopes out and we literally just pop it up on the sidewalk and encourage people to just look at the moon or Saturn or Jupiter or whatever might be visible in the night sky. We have our Stargirls STEM camp. One of the things that we've recognised, particularly out in the regions, is that we don't want to be not including young boys as well and encouraging them to pursue space careers. So we're tweaking that a little bit, but Stargirls has been predominantly in our metro area. And then we have our work experience programs. So all of these, we give preference for those that are in maybe more marginalised communities or less access to the education that we offer. We also have a telescope as well as an educational radio array. So people can actually log on and they can use the telescope and learn how to use it. So we have different training programs for those as well. So these are just a few of our... So the Spirit telescope is one in the top left. This is one of the images that one of the students has been able to do. So as a result of doing the training and things like that, we find that astrophysics and astronomy gets people a little bit excited about STEM, even if they don't pursue that as a career. We have, that's a little picture from AstroFest. And then this is our educational radio array as well, so where people are starting to learn about the radio astronomy, the engineering side, and projects involved with that. So that's all from me for the moment, and I'll hand over to Michelle.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming along to last session of day 2. It's a tough time slot, but so thank you for sticking around and coming along. I work at Nova Systems. My role is the Director of Talent and Workforce Planning. For those of you who don't know who Nova Systems is, although you probably do by the end of day 2, we're 100% Australian owned. We're an engineering and advisory management service, and alongside digital technology, software and systems integrations. I just want to acknowledge that today we meet on Kaurna land and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I also want to acknowledge the services of First Nations people who have contributed to defending Australia in our Defence Force. I had the pleasure a couple of weeks ago to be on a panel discussion here in South Australia that was hosted by the Office for Women, and it was about talking about the barriers to participation of women in male-dominated industries. It was a great forum, but somewhat a little bit depressing because I don't know if anyone's noticed, but it's 2024 and we're still having these discussions. And we are still dealing with these types of phrases and words every day in our workplace. And I think, unfortunately, this word cloud just paints a bit of a picture of what that can look like on a daily basis for some women, and particularly for women in male-dominated workplaces. I guess the question and what we're here to talk about today, in some ways, is how can we change this? how do we make our workplaces safe for everyone, not just for women, but for everyone, so that they can be who they are and can contribute to the organisation in their way. So what are we doing at Nova Systems? I'm just going to quickly take you through this. We are on a journey. We are not perfect. We are a male-dominated workforce. We have one female on our senior leadership team, and you won't be surprised to know that that's the Chief HR Officer. We have one female on our board. So we've got some work to do. What is really exciting about Nova Systems is that we have fantastic support from the top. Our leaders are committed to making change and to being a more diverse and inclusive organisation. And without that commitment from the top, you really are, in a battle. It's just so critical. So our strategy is not, I'm here to talk about women in particular, but our strategy is across those 4 pillars. And within the Women in Nova pillar, we have a gender equality strategy. So what I wanted to point out here is that we have chosen to go with a mission and strategy objectives, not quotas. I'm sure that we've all been in workplaces and seen, quotas work really well, but we've also seen them work really badly. So we've decided not to go in that direction, and we would rather have some goals and some objectives. And we want to work on the things that are really important to us. And we know that these things are important to us because we went out and we asked people, what's your experience at work as a woman in a male-dominated organisation, and what can we do to help improve the culture, the systems, the policies, the process, whatever it might be. So we've had over 50 people in workshops, we've had over 30 one-on-one conversations, and we continue to have those conversations. Some of those conversations have been really uncomfortable for some people. As you know, in general, people think they're a good person, they're doing the right thing, and sometimes, we just say things without thinking, we don't understand the impact that it might have on others. So, like I said, we're on a journey, and we will continue to have those discussions, as uncomfortable as they can be for some people. I just want to talk a little bit about what we've done already. Obviously, we've done a lot of listening. We've got some great flexibility policies, and our policies are above the national employment standards. So, for example, most of those standards say, you have to wait 12 months until you can ask for some sort of flexibility. Day one in Nova, you're eligible for flexibility. Not on everything. There are some things you have to pass probation, for example, so it's not everything. And some people would argue that our flexible working arrangements are for everyone. Well, yes, they are, but there are some flexible working arrangements that we know that women are more likely to access than our male workers. At the moment, we're doing a little bit of work around addressing our pay gap, which I'm so excited about. We're doing a REM review at the moment, and part of that REM review has a special bucket of money where we can start to try and lift some salaries of people doing similar jobs, similar experience, but there may be some pay parities. So again, that's not just for women, but we already know, diving into our data, that women are mostly affected by that. We won't be able to fix all of those issues. We don't have an endless bucket of money. But I think this is really exciting. This will go a long way to bridging that gap. We're also working on some salary banding, so that's around making sure going forward that when we employ people from the beginning that there is better equity across the pay. We also have a ways of working toolkit, so that's really around building up our culture and focusing on that area. I guess I hope that today you get a bit of a sense of how complex diversity and inclusion can truly be. I hope that you walk away feeling a little bit better educated than what you were when you came in. I hope you get some insights. And most importantly, I hope that from today's discussion, you've got something that you can take away to your workplace tomorrow and put into place straight away. And even if that is just having a conversation with someone that says, hey, I notice you don't speak up when we have team meetings. I really want to know what you think about this. I think if you do that, then we are stepping in the right direction. Thank you.
Right. Hello, my name's Chris Lawerence. I'm a Noongar, Wajak Baladong from Western Australia. That's where I was born. That's my people, and I want to acknowledge the Kaurna mobs here as well, pay my respects to them and their ancestors. And, you know, this is all about recognising people in the space that we're in, and that's what it's about. Also, I want to acknowledge my colleague here, Professor Larry James, and it's great that he's here to support us, because it's people like Larry that really make a big difference, and he's done that for me and for our Indigenous program, our National Indigenous Space Academy, and the other amazing people at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And I acknowledge all the other and my colleagues here. So I guess when listening to Asha's talk about growing up, for me, I was taken home to an Aboriginal reserve or reservation when I was born, to my 16-year-old mother and 17-year-old Aboriginal, both Aboriginal parents. They'd just come out of being in the mission, and so at that time, when they got to 16 years of age, they were sent back to these reservations. And so my life started on the reserve, and Aboriginal people didn't have citizenship rights. That didn't come till a year later. And if you do the maths, you'll work out my age. But the point is, I was born into that system where there was segregation and there was all these laws that prevented Aboriginal people from being on the streets and living in the same towns as non-Indigenous people. So, but I used to go to the principal's office to get the cane, not to go up and tell them what they were doing wrong. So at some point in my life, I figured out, I don't want to keep going up to the principal getting the cane, so I'm going to put my head down and just get on with my work and do as I was told. But I was such an inquisitive person, because I'd always be talking in the class and asking questions. And I thought, well, that's what you do, right? You're supposed to ask questions, and that's how you learn. So it was a different story at home. We were encouraged to talk and whatever, except at the meal time and at the table, you know. You just got it, you ate, and you didn't talk until later. But it was those kind of things that drove me. And then I ended up in, telling you, I don't know why I'm telling you the story, but I ended up in, I went to a co-ed Catholic convent. And so I had the nuns around. And Mother Reverend was actually really lovely, but, you know, she had a little thing that she didn't hold back on if you didn't move and get out of the way. But one of the sisters, Sister Maria, used to make me get up and sing and dance to ABBA's Dancing Queen. And I just thought, okay. And so these were different types of nuns, right? They were totally different, and she'd lock the door and we'd all have fun. And all the kids, she was just one of these amazing people that have always inspired me. I guess because she wasn't, you know, kind of one of those nuns that, you know, didn't talk, right? So this is the sort of stuff that inspired me to think about, well, what am I going to do with my life and where I want it to be? And obviously university is one of those places. But I used to always dream about space. I used to fly in my dreams. I used to put my bed up against the window so I can look out at the stars and the moon. And I'd always think, I'd ask for the aliens to come and get me, because I didn't know who these people were that I was living with. So put all that into context of why this bold idea, I actually got sent to San Diego back in 2018 by my then dean at one of the universities I worked for. I won't say who, but he sent me there to the Centre for Creative Leadership, only to discover that we were all arrogant people. That's basically what the bottom line was. And I said, well, I could have saved him 20 grand and told him I'm arrogant, why send me to San Diego? But then one of the guys that were there was from Marty Johnson from JPL. And everybody was saying, he's from JPL, and there's this big, thing going on. I'm like, well, who's JPL? What's JPL? And then when I found out, and I was like, oh, wow. And so Marty was really, I told my story, and he was really, wanting to hear more. And I told him this bold idea that I wanted to send Aboriginal people into space. And he said, okay, let's make it happen. And that's how it all evolved. And I ended up spending a few months at JPL with Larry and his team, the education team, who are really important in this space. And so there's just some background there about that, how we set this all up. And it was really, I think, it was really about how do we engage and bring in diverse students into these kind of spaces. So this is a poem that I wrote as well when I get really, I'm a Gemini as well, so there's lots of things going on in my head, and there's all these voices, and so I kind of write stuff and think about what I'm talking about, and I might leave that for a little bit. And this is Gloria. This is our mascot. We're still working on her spacesuit, but Gloria evolved when I was at NASA's JPL last year, and my mother unfortunately passed away, and so I thought this could be a way of paying homage to her by creating this image that I was working with a school to embed Indigenous knowledge systems, STEM, into their curriculum. So this was kind of this, how do we encourage, right? How do we bring more diversity and equity inclusion into these areas? So it's about seeing who you can be, because you can't be what you can't see. So here's Gloria. And Gloria is actually mimicked on one of the Indigenous students that are going this year. But I didn't want to call her, I called her after my mum. But one of the students got red hair. So I thought, well, here you go. So that's Gloria, and I hope you've had some time to read that poem. But it's kind of that inspiration that I want to encourage other Indigenous students to get involved. And this was really the report that we provided to the Australian Space Agency, who funded us last year and partnered with us. And so they're our collaborators. And these are some of the images of the students that went and spent time there at JPL, and they all worked on different projects, and it was really interesting. And look, they just happened to be Aboriginal, but they're scientists and technologists and engineers, mathematicians. The first couple that we sent back in 2019, those guys, one was now running his own mathematical program at Cambridge University. They've all finished their PhDs. Two of them have become Fulbright scholars, because I was a Fulbright scholar. And I said, well, this is what you do, right? And so they're just like, okay. So I'm literally, these are children that I don't have, right? So I feel like they're mum and dad when I'm there with them, making sure that they're settling into Pasadena. And I can't really see the slides, but that's just about what I did was ask our comms and marketing people to generate this audit of how many hits did our program have on the Monash website, and the value of that. And that's what we were the number one item for Monash University over the last year. We just got all the hits. And so this kind of proves the value and the worth of this program and what this program stands for. So nobody could argue with us about getting more funding, right? I don't know where Enrico is, but he knows. So this is the work that we do. I can't really see the slides, but that's kind of the stuff that we do to make sure that we've got inclusion. Sorry, I just can't see the slides. But this is kind of the range of activities we do to get the information out there, to get that inclusivity. Some more outreach stuff. This is really just giving you some of that really important content about what these programs can achieve if you do it in the right way. But also, we've got an amazing marketing comms team that really do do this incredible work for us when I ask them to do it. And these are just some of the people that when we launched it here last year, we had the NASA administrators come, Bill Nelson and Pam Melroy. They officially launched our program at the Space Education Centre here in Adelaide. And so these were some of the people that came. This is and you can find these on our Monash website. If you put in Indigenous Space Academy Monash, this will come up and you can see those videos of these students, so you'll know who they are. So Lyndon was one of our students who went from Monash, and he worked for one of the divisions there to looking at improving and updating the software for the International Space Station. And Lyndon is he's lovely. He's gone on to do some amazing things now. And I'll just flick through. These are, this is CEDA. We make sure that we have women in this program. There will always be women in this program because Indigenous women need to be seen as well, and they are there wanting to be part of this, this whole ecosystem that we're creating. Lincoln and Tully, who's gone on to do amazing things. These guys are now contemplating what they do with their lives after coming back from JPL because it's all changed everything. And so they're now looking to do their PhDs and continuing to work with some of the NASA programs like Ted. He's still continuing to do his work with them and travelling with them to Antarctica as well. So I guess just in terms of wanting to set the scene for this talk of the conference, is that EDI, equity, diversity, inclusion, does pay off. And it brings lots of values and lots of opportunities for your company or your university or institution or whatever it is that you're working on. I might leave it there. Thank you.
Good afternoon all. My name is Zoe James, and if you can't tell by the spring in my step and twinkle in my eye, I am indeed an early career space professional. I am also queer and neurodivergent. There is a common sentiment that you can't be what you can't see, but there is more to the issue of visible representation than that. For example, try to think of the names of 3 astronauts. If names like Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, maybe Andy Thomas came to mind, raise your hand. If any female astronaut names came to mind, raise your hand. I'm so glad Catherine Benepeg was here. This point would have been so much better if she wasn't here, but over 100 women have been to space, and yet why is it that we can only name so few of them? So many have achieved the dream that lots of us have had as children, yet it still feels so distant, near unobtainable. And though I've used astronauts as an example in this case, the same goes for so many aspects of the space industry. It still feels as though to exist in these spaces, we have to fight to be heard or seen or recognised. And although trailblazers are fantastic and much appreciated, not every new graduate wants to be one. It is exhausting to think of having to make every day a battleground as you work in a space that is hostile to you, and no one should have to. New graduates are making educated and informed decisions about where they choose to start their careers, basing this on environmental impact and sustainability, culture, and public perception. They will not apply if they don't feel as though they will be welcome and able to express themselves authentically and receive support when needed. Inclusivity is sustainability. Do not deny yourselves a new generation of groundbreaking space professionals by excluding them. In my personal experience, I was targeted and discriminated against during my degree, though I refused to back down or be quiet when I was talked over, interrupted, or ignored by my professors or cohort. I was able to graduate despite this, but many of my female peers did not. I'm one of 3 female graduates from a class of 300. I, in fact, am only in my current job right now because the first interview that I did at the Defence Science and Technology Group was with a neurodivergent woman who answered all of my questions, assuaged my fears, and gave me very real information and actions on the way I would be supported in the workplace. Since then, my position has evolved into one where I can not only leverage my knowledge in space weather effects, but also engage with other young people and with our inclusion team to make changes for the better across the organisation. So I want to challenge the idea that you can't be what you don't see, because seeing someone achieve something doesn't necessarily make it easier for the next person to do the exact same thing. What we need is diversity at every level of these organisations, from floor to ceiling, to ensure that not only are the appropriate supports in place for any individual that joins, but that they find representation and community at every level through formal and informal peer support. DSTG has a variety of initiatives aimed at encouraging diverse hiring and supporting diverse individuals within the organisation. Though unfortunately we are still sitting at 20% female staff, though this is represented at every level of the organisation, we have our first female Chief Defence Scientist, Tanya Munro, spearheading many of these initiatives for change. Having a woman in your website header is not enough. Fostering community and support at each level of your organisation and engaging with external diversity groups to educate and inform is necessary for change required to create a diverse and sustainable workforce. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hey, look at that. Engagement. You are so lucky. I am the very last presenter of the Australian Space Forum. Yay! You have successfully completed this. There's questions and other bits and pieces. So I'll keep it brief and keep it simple. I'm here to tell you about the social model of disability. Small topic. Clicker goes that way. Cool. People might know what disability is. Disability comes in a few different models. Most people think about it from the viewpoint of the medical model. I have a disability, I apply a cure, I'm no longer disabled. Yay. Can't do that in society. Society will always have disability. Currently, ABS statistics put us as 5 million. That grew. It was 4.4 in the 2020 census. You need to think about it from a different format. The social model of disability. Conditions, such as missing fingers, missing legs, psychological situations, hearing, sight, thinking, and barriers. What are they? Barriers is things that we put in place that prevent certain people to come into that environment. For example, how do you get into the forum today? Was it via an escalator or a nice flowing ramp? How heavy was that front door? Those are the type of things I notice as a person with a physical disability. But an autistic person might notice sound levels, they might notice wayfinding issues, they might notice different elements. So you can use this formula, and how many of you guys are engineers? Okay, cool. You guys love formulas. Here's some maths for you. Do this 6 times. Do this with the different icons, and you make every space inclusive. Easy. It's not about individual stories, it's about the interactions. Simple. Don't worry about every type of disability out there, because they're growing. COVID told us about a whole bunch of new ones. The invisible disability, the capacity, the ones that you can't breathe after so long. You can only do so much of concentrated work. We learned how to cope and manage. Social model of disability. Simple, 1 slide. Now, why would I care about this, right? What's the value of caring about these symbols? Oh, by the way, that's my mission patch. In the very top, there was logos that I use in the Enable network, and I know there's a little bit of bouncing over the place. The logos that I use in the Enable network, which is a peer support network I started in the transport industry in New South Wales. These ones over here were used in Department of Planning and Infrastructure in New South Wales. And this was my mission patch for when we did some 0G flights in Houston, Texas in 2022. The logos are different every time. Why? The first model, when I was learning about this stuff, is based on the deficit model. For example, when you look at the hearing symbol, you can see it's got a line through it, and eyes with the darkening of it, which makes it seem like the person cannot see and they cannot hear. The ones on the mission patch talk about the tools that actually make it accessible and inclusive in our interactions. Upgrade over time. Yes, even I'm learning. It's okay to learn on this journey and get it wrong, but you've got to keep progressing. But why care about this? Because permanent, temporary, situational. I'm holding a cup of coffee. I want to order a cup of coffee, and I'm missing an arm. Same as I've got my mobile phone on, and I want to order that cup of coffee. As well as I'm holding a baby or a microphone. Situational. The reason in every pub there's subtitles on is because you're all deaf. Because the music's too damn loud. Situational. Same thing applies for space. Same thing applies for your workplaces. What is a condition? Something that I have, but a barrier is something like gravity. And so, in 0G, do I have a disability? I have my conditions, but I have my mobility. And so this is the thing that we can really consider talking about at this upthing. Done. Keep it short and simple. I'll leave that image up there. And we have some dice to play with. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you all so very much for sharing all of your experiences with us. I think, a really common theme that's come up in everybody's presentations is really that sense of changing the narrative a bit and creating identities for all of these groups from the outset so that everybody can see their place in space. But we're going to now have a bit of a Q&A. If I could join you all, that would be great. Yeah, it would include me. Thank you so much. So we have a lot of questions here and a lot of bits and pieces that I think our audience are really keen to hear your expert opinions on. So the first question that I'm going to ask is about how the space industry can promote diversity and inclusion to attract and retain a talented and diverse workforce and ensuring equitable access to opportunities within the industry. I'm going to direct this question first to, to Chris and then Zoe, if that's okay.
Great. I think that obviously investment, and not just financial investment, it's the commitment from, having a vision. It's the planning and it's the strategy of what you're trying to achieve for your organisation or your business. So it's actually making sure that that's what, and it's not just ticking boxes, it's actually having actions and achievable, but also those bold ones like going to space, sending Indigenous students to NASA and JPL. That's the sort of stuff that if you've got people in the organisation who have a vision, that's you kind of have to, you find a way to support that, right? Regardless of whatever outrageous the vision might be. Because I know when I talked about creating this program, I know the reaction I had from some people, but at the time my Vice Chancellor just said, go and make it happen. He gave me 30 grand and said, go make it happen. And that's when I brought Larry back with me. So it was like, first they didn't really believe me, and then all of a sudden, like, Larry's here, and it's like, okay, this is real. So then, they threw more money, and so we took more students. Look, equity, diversity, inclusion, of course it's all those things about investment, but from a range of different things, not just about financial.
Thanks so much, Chris. Zoe, would you like to add to that?
Sure. I think one of the key things to getting young career people to apply to your organisation is to make sure that they know that there are those strategies in place. If it's just internal, if there's no external talk about it, they're not going to want to apply because they won't know. If you have on your website a really open and honest, have your statistics, have what groups you're a part of, both internal and external, have your initiatives for change there, visually present, so that when young people are researching where they're going to apply for their internship, researching where they're going to apply for their grad position, they have a tab on the website that is our diversity, and they can go there and find that information, and that will help to attract them. Retaining them is actually actioning all of those things and having them in the first place.
So doing what you say you're going to do. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That leads us on, I guess, to the next question, which is about, again, strategies that the space industry can use. But this time it's, I guess, about what kind of strategies can address the barriers that we know do exist to entry, and then once you're in the industry, to progression as well, for all of the different underrepresented groups. Dwayne, I'd like you to answer this one, please.
So I'm actually not in the space industry. Fun part, right? So how does a guy who's done one interview get parabolic flight? And that's the thing. Why are we putting so intense barriers? And you just go speak to astronaut down the road over there. She had to go to 27 plus interviews, plus medicals, plus this, plus that. Those are all your barriers. You're about to reach an age where you want the commercialization of the space age, the space community. If not, we'll be having this entire talk on a military base, and it'd be only soldiers, and that's fine. Because you want it to be commercial, you have to allow everybody to be ordinary. Your job interview should not be as complicated at every different level for what you need them to have the skill. The one simple skill is what you need, which means that right now, at the time that this guy is about to land an epic rocket back down on Earth, that rocket is going to reduce the price of space travel significantly. So right now is when you build inclusion. They're good at building rockets, but what they're not good at building is society. Australia is impressively good at building society, which is why it's really important all of you get involved right now to think about that and actually having really diverse thought processes. As complicated as difficult our communities are in this space, we're actually diverse. And we, for most part, get along. We have a generally non-threatening political system, which is pretty impressive. So effectively, be Australia, but be Australia in the space industry is a simple answer.
Thank you so much, Dwayne. And Zoe, you have already shared with us some of your experiences of, barriers to entering the industry, and what it looked like when it was successful. So I'd love to also hear your response to that question, just about what those workforces can do to reduce those barriers.
I have a unique perspective on this working in government and in defence. We have to work at quite a high security posture a lot of the time, which does have ingrained into it a barrier to entry for culturally and language diverse people, which is hard to ignore and hard to overcome. Aside from that, there are issues with, I think, when you hire people, they don't want to disclose that they require support because they think that, if I am hard work, I won't be hired. I need to be as appealing as possible to these people. One of the barriers to entry is taking a inclusivity discussion away from that interview process and having a one-on-one with someone who is a part of your inclusive ally group, then sitting down with someone in an informal space that doesn't impact your interview and saying, hey, this is the kind of things that are available. Would any of this be appealing to you? Do you want to know more about it? And just open the door for people to acknowledge that they might need support in something and to find out if that's available. And if it's not available, they can tell you that and you can go, okay, what do you need? How can we supply that for you? If we are able to have open and honest discussions that are separate from our employability about support, there shouldn't be barriers.
Yes, thank you. So almost modelling that accessibility and letting people know that it can be safe to disclose, and that people do have that fear that neurodivergence particularly can be equated with capability, which is something I can certainly empathise with. So thank you for that. Asha, I'm coming to you next. So we know that diverse, equitable and inclusive workforces have been shown to enhance innovation, creativity and overall productivity of organisations. In your experience, what strategies would you see that have the maximum impact in building such a workforce?
Thank you. It's really hard because I don't think it's any one particular thing that's going to be, like, there is no silver bullet out there that will change things. For me, I think within my own practices is always trying to be mindful and actually just taking a moment and consider what it is like in terms of from their perspective. So certainly there can be institutional barriers. You're sharing around the recruitment process and things like that. Some of those things we almost get like mandated in terms of the format that we need to follow. But we're always looking at different ways that we can try and make some of these experiences more inclusive. So for example, doing a lot of online interviews and things like that, making sure that people have, so we don't provide the questions ahead of time, but we do put a copy of them like in the chat so that they can read them, so that they can read it and sort of regroup their thoughts. From a culturally and linguistically diverse, we have a huge range of people coming globally, and English is not necessarily their first language. But one of the things that we get a lot of regular feedback from our people is that they have an opportunity to celebrate the traditions or the customs that are important to them. So they're the little things that we do that they feel that they can bring their whole selves to work. And I think that that's, for we're at Purple Day, where we're celebrating those, in terms of youth and pride. One of our colleagues, he has only recently disclosed that he's gay, and then he came out wearing full purple and makeup and everything. And it was just, for us, everyone just felt so, I guess it was a joy that, he could just be himself, that he didn't have to have this persona that he can only keep sort of on the weekends or outside of work hours, that he could bring his full self to work. So, for those, there's so many different strategies, whether you're looking at leadership development, whether you're looking at mentoring, and I think you can't do any of those things in isolation. So for anyone that's trying to work out what they are doing, I would, actually take note of what you actually do have in place, but just having those conversations, what are some of the ways that people can feel more supportive, and also just looking at some of the cues, the behaviours and things like that, like are people, you can look at some of the stats in terms of turnover, and you certainly don't want to recruit people and then have them leave straight away because sort of what you promised is not that reality. But you're looking at those behaviours, are people speaking up in the workplace? Are they contributing their ideas? These little, sort of, we often talk about microaggressions, but I think these little sort of micro sort of sparks of, inclusive behaviours are also just as powerful.
Thank you so much. And for somebody to be able to bring their full selves is really, really a great thing to see. And people's fear, I guess, of that, it's born from the fact that, there is a lot of bias and a lot of things that people have unconsciously, which brings me around to a question I would love Michelle to answer, please. Michelle, what do you think could be done in the space industry to address those unconscious biases, particularly in how they affect recruitment processes, promotion processes as well, and decision-making processes?
Yeah, thank you. A couple of stories that I can tell here. We're interviewing at the moment for our next graduate program, and apparently a young female graduate went into the interview. One of the questions she asked was, I can see from your website that you don't have a lot of women in leadership, and what are you doing about that? Why would I come and work for you? I was like, yes, good question.
So really pleased, that she had the courage to actually ask that question. I mean, back in, when I was starting in my career, there was no way in hell you would ask that question. You were just happy to have a job. So really pleased to see that happening. I had a job interview a couple of years ago. It was with an organisation that works in the trades area. And I walked, it was a senior position, I walked in there were 4 people on the panel, that's, nothing unusual. They were all men, and they proceeded to ask me if I got the job, what strategies would I put in place to encourage women to participate in the trades area. And all I could think of was, well, this little scenario won't be happening. Again, can't say that in an interview, so didn't get the job. I'm pretty pleased about that. So I think, particularly in our industry, in Nova Systems, we work a lot in the defence space, and, we have a lot of people coming out of the armed forces into our workforce and becoming consultants and working in defence organisations. The language is, traditionally male-type language. So when we're advertising, we're very conscious that we're using, plain, simple, easy, friendly language where we can. We definitely look for gender diversity on our interview panels. That is something that now that I've come on board, I'm certainly pushing more. It's not always achievable because we don't have a lot of women in the organisation compared to men, so, but really pushing that. And I think, again, part of this for me, it starts at home. If we want young girls to dream to be astronauts or to be whatever it is, I'm not in the space industry either, by the way. We have to have great role models out there. We have to see people doing those things. And one of the things I've learned over the last couple of weeks, I've had a couple of speaking engagements, is, don't underestimate the power of a young girl being able to see someone doing something and then dreaming about it. And I hate to bring it up, but, the AFLW, we've got a lot of lessons to learn from that. That has always been male, and now are becoming just as successful as what the men were. I think there's a lot as organisations that we could learn from that about attracting and retaining people into that industry. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess on that, and we're coming back to what a lot of you referenced in your speeches and sharing about yourselves and your journeys. Is about that STEM outreach and, creating the identity that children can see and that all children can see and see themselves represented in space. In what ways do you think the space industry can collaborate with educational institutions, government agencies and non-profit organisations to promote STEM education and to create those pathways for diverse talent into the industry? I'd like to hear from Asha and Drain on this, please.
Thank you. So, I shared some of the different educational programs that we have, but I guess where our challenge is often who's actually going to fund that. So as a research, we're sort of University of WA, we do get government funding to do a portion of the outreach and things and our operational support. But, WA particularly is a very big state, and our outreach coordinators certainly do their best to go out as often as they can. But, the reality is that a lot of these kids that are out in the regions would probably only have a touch point maybe once, possibly twice in their lower education around STEM. So we have SciTech over in WA as well, in Perth, and they will see every school once every 3 years. So, these different things, it's trying to find different ways that you can actually get out there into the regions, continuing to support and promote. We do a lot around, equity and like that, we haven't had any Indigenous students come through yet. It's one of the things that we really do recognise, and certainly hoping that in partnership with Chris's program that we'll start to see a difference there, because we'll have some more, role models and things like that, and those pathways. But it's always, for like industry are wanting this diverse talent and things like that, but you look at the stats and we just don't have the kids studying it at the moment, regardless of what opportunities they are being given. So really the importance of those role models, the importance of actually funding these organisations that are getting out there and doing that work, and also making sure that people are available to be those role models as well. But the huge challenge is that particularly when you're often, for women or for the cultural load, there's so many things that you're asking the same people. And it's great to see some organisations starting to actually really address that and put, making sure that these people are supported and recognised for that cultural load, and they're given, additional sort of funding or support or leave or whatever the mechanism that you actually have. Yeah, like I think for companies to actually really recognise like how much they are asking, because so many of these things you see, it's the same people putting their hands up.
Similar fashion. So with regards to partnerships and succeeding in that area, what they did with the Lego company with Catherine Bell, smart, so smart, right? It's not the things that you expect. So basically, they made a Lego astronaut of her, and they launched it at the Lego store. Brilliant. That's how you get kids interested in that space. And you got to look outside the box, and you kind of need to go to places where they are, and you are the odd one out, and you can speak to them in their language. So some of the stuff that I've managed to get away and do is there was a German group that was doing a camp for people with brittle bone disease. I had a little bit of experience with this thing, so they were trying to do like a HAB mission. So I just recorded a video going, hey guys, you're on your lunar HAB mission. This is the package that's coming in. We did a bit like a feed. I gave them some information, and they would then have to go ahead and do creative elements. And so it doesn't take much, but it just needs to be tactical. And that's just organizations volunteering their logo to be in the right place at the right time. But ASDA can do quite a bit of that to support. And because the individual support per company, I can see how that can feel like a lot, right? If you don't have it in your core statements, I'm here to make engines. What the heck does that mean for me with diversity? It feels like it's off. But if you have your mission and vision I'm about propulsion, and it needs to be, like, you've got to line up the statements, and then therefore it becomes natural to the organization to do so. My company, Minds at Play, doesn't have a HR team, but we have 40 staff, and we play Dungeons & Dragons and Minecraft. The gender diversity is 50% women, 28% LGBTQIA, 60% people with disability, and the rest are, what's the old statement? Pale, male, and stale. But they have the knowledge, and that's what I love about this thing. It brings everybody together, and the process is inclusive, and you can achieve that. Now, my barrier to entry is not an engineering degree, so let's be clear on those things. But there are people who have a job with me that would never be able to get a job, ever. They don't hit. So the different level of benchmark that gets hit for that type of company. And it can hit really good diversity markers, but also really good, you think about it as profitable. My company is a profit for purpose company, and we bootstrapped our way to 600 players with 40 staff, and my total investment was like $2,000. So if you add it into your core, your business can be profitable with purpose.
Thank you so much, both of you. I think, it's a really good point that, the ASDA is now here to support where we can, and hopefully move away from practices where we have the representatives of those marginalised groups in certain companies and in certain sectors carrying that load and doing all of that work. And on that topic, I'd love to hear, any experiences of support that the panel has from employee resource groups, diversity councils, or inclusion networks in promoting DEI. So I have noted here Michelle and Zoe out to speak, but I think everybody might have something to say on this, so please feel free to jump in.
Are you ready with notebooks and pens? I have a list. For LGBTQIA+ support and training, look to Queerspace, Headspace, the LGBT Health Alliance, and for Defence we have Pride and Diversity. For gender inclusion, the SBS training catalogue, Gender Works for training. For support, Meetup and Band of Sisters. DSGG is part of the SAGE initiative and we have a bronze medal, which, that's pretty good. For neurodivergency, for training, go to the Neurodivergency Hub. They have lists upon lists of resources, or Evolve. And for support, there is Very Helpful Chats and the Society for Neurodivergency. That is available all over Australia. Some of them are local to a certain state, but often offer online support as well.
So I'll just talk about it from an organisational point of view. We have a diversity and inclusion group, a working group that helps to support the diversity and inclusion strategy that we have in place. For us in our industry, I think it's really important to participate in these types of discussions, we do quite a bit of that across the organisation. So I think there are lots of resources out there, and sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming knowing where to start. In an organisation, the number one place to start is actually ask your people, and it doesn't matter what the issue is. Most of the time, your employees have some sort of answer. And in developing our strategy, we used some surveys and some data and, that we already had in the organisation. But what I will say about surveys is they are only an indicator of where you need to go and ask more questions. If people tick the box and say, yeah, there are, barriers for me to progress in my career, whatever it might be, then, oh, look at that, we've got some barriers, awesome. Well, no, the next question is why? What are those barriers and what are we going to do to fix those barriers? And the best way to do that is to ask your people.
Oh, very true. Dwayne, I think, is going to give us an answer to this one as well.
So with ERGs and things of that nature, if your company is 7 people, don't start an ERG. Just ask Gary if he's okay, okay? Don't make it overcomplicated. Transport had 20,000 staff. Department of Planning had 2,000 staff. At that numbers, you'll end up with a sufficient amount of people that you get a little bit of anonymity, especially in an ERG or a peer support space. Peer support spaces are great, definitely great. But it's actually worth us, if the organizations are small, having a centralized external one that supports. And something like ASDA might be how we could do some of that. Again, it's feeling like it's starting to feel like a bit of a plug, but effectively, but with that, it's trying to figure out how you get good information and support your people without it feeling like it's a burden for the organization. But in addition to that, the more supported your people are, the more likely they're coming back to your workplace. And if they are coming back to your workplace, your industry is growing. And that's as simple as that. And we want to get it to a large infrastructure space, right? That's what we need.
Absolutely right. I have a list of questions in front of me, and I feel like we've really answered them really thoroughly. We are coming near the end of the panel, and I'm sure some of our audience have burning questions that they would love to ask some of you, so I want to make sure we leave some time for that. So if anybody has any questions, now is your chance.
We only bite once.
Being an organisation, the leaders scaffold their learning and mentor them, let them, if they want to step down again, then you think about the problem is, once again, this ego gets in the way. Hormones, male hormones most of the time get in the way. So I think it's having that sort of mind. I got a really voice. Having that mindfulness and something that is also being studied, going into space. What sort of people will be the greatest assets to have in the space station? These people who have those abilities, less ego, less controlling your hormones, emotional control, mindfulness. So all of this comes into once again the diversity of having that sort of people. Imagine just putting military people in space, what will happen. That kind of thing. So I think it was great just to hear once again the diversity. We got here more women than men once again in this kind of scenario, but I think it's just great to see the advancement that from being taken as a child to where you are today, and also you're struggling with arguing against your professors at RMIT. I can say it. It's great to see that we're advancing, we're taking it into space, and forum such as this, I think it's a great bravo to all of this.
Cheers. Thank you. David from Mariota. Michelle, you mentioned in your last slide you had a toolkit. Yes. I'm wondering if you can just let us know what's the sort of information's in that toolkit.
To be honest, the toolkit is evolving. So the purpose of the toolkit and the concept behind it is really around the culture. You can have a great diversity and inclusion plan, but if that's not supported by senior leadership and by the culture of your organisation, then you really are just ticking a box. So the idea of the toolkit is to upskill managers and upskill our people to have inclusive conversations and to be aware of their own behaviours and their own biases, because I can tell you at the moment there's a lot of this going on. Oh, it's not me, I'm a really good person, so it must be them, because I do the right thing. So that's really the idea of the toolkit, is to help managers, manage their people and have those good conversations, giving and receiving feedback. Who would think that is so hard, but apparently it is. So that's kind of the premises of it, but it very much is evolving.
Awesome, thanks. ATSI also recently released a D&I toolkit for startups, which is awesome, and I wish existed when we got started. So yeah, I think toolkits are really helpful. So yeah, thanks.
Just more of a comment, and certainly, Chris, it's great to work with you down at Monash, but really just a couple things maybe in the toolkit, if you will. I know in the U.S., before I retired from JPL and came here, we were struggling in the aerospace industry to say, how do we get the diversity in this industry that frankly doesn't exist? So we kind of hatched a program called Space Workforce 2030. You can find it online, and essentially we went to the major aerospace companies and said, are you willing to be held accountable? Are you willing to share your data? Are you willing to say, we're going to set some targets and we're going to publish those every year in terms of how you're doing? Again, at a top level, not down at every individual person kind of thing, but we actually, the big companies, Boeing, SpaceX, Northrop, smaller companies, Virgin, they've all signed up, and so each year they will put out a report that says, here's how we're doing. So as you think about, how do we hold companies accountable here, especially in the aerospace industry, you almost shame them into being a part of it, frankly, but say, hey, look, Boeing and Lockheed joined up and you're not, and then the lawyers get all excited and, well, what can we divulge and all these things, but I'm just saying there's already a model out there in terms of across an industry saying, look, we're going to tackle this industry-wide, and be somebody like the Space Forum or somebody that have to do this from an industry-wide perspective, but get people on board, get a few key people, few key companies on board, and then suddenly it starts snowballing. And then you have a mechanism to say, how are we doing? and how are we comparing ourselves to others? And to the point of leadership buying in, it kind of forces them to buy in because, frankly, they want us to be seen as improving over time. And so that's just, a thing in the toolkit. You can find it online, Space Workforce 2030. And I know they will be happy to talk to you about, hey, maybe we have an Australian chapter here to do the very same thing. And at the Space Forum every year, you kind of roll out, how did the industry do? Because we do that at the Space Symposium back in Colorado Springs every year to kind of roll it out and say, how are you doing? So it's just a nice forcing function to kind of get the industry to do better. So just a thought.
I think sorry, I'll hand over to you in a minute. I think, the similar thing we have here in Australia now is that we're publishing the gender pay gap. So, that's public information, big organisations. We are naming and shaming. I don't think we've seen a lot of movement yet, but is this year the first year that we've done that? I can't remember. Might be the second year. I think, it'll gain momentum because no one wants to be around the boardroom when the chair of the board is looking at the CEO going, publicly domain, we are not doing so well here. So fingers crossed that will help with some of that.
I just want to make a small comment about, when we talk about diversity in the workplace, the knee-jerk reaction is usually we need to hire more women. And that's kind of always the big push, especially in aerospace engineering specifically, the most male-dominated field that exists. But there is a stumbling point in that we often don't recognise is that if you are hiring women, are you just hiring the same woman over and over again? Your male workforce is probably very diverse personality-wise. You've probably got a lot of introverts, extroverts, type A, type B, probably a lot of neurodiverse people there in a lot of degrees. But are your female workforce that diverse as well? Do you have type B personalities? Do you have introverted women? Were they able to stand out in their group interviews, their panel interviews? Or did you only hire the women who spoke up and made themselves shown and heard and had that same personality trait that got hired again and again? Because the woman on your hiring panel is like that as well and wants to hire like for like. Because those are the unconscious biases that we always carry with us, and we need to question every decision that we make and make sure that we acknowledge our own biases and address them fully and try to stamp them out, because everyone's got them. We just don't want to acknowledge them.
And just to follow on from that as well, this is my opinion, not that of the moderator. So one of the risks when we look at, let's hire more women is that you can be presented with a candidate that's maybe gender fluid or maybe doesn't fit into a box that you have on your sheet in front of you, and that can be highly problematic in its own way as well. In having a lot of the gender discussions are very binary, so that's just something else to note. But I'm loving the sound of the Workforce 30, so I think that's something that we need to look at and to look at what kind of mechanisms there would be for acting on results, because that's definitely something to consider. Do we have one final question from our audience? I think we've got time for just one more. Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. This might be our last point then. Thank you.
Yeah, the second that gender diversity comes into question, I get excited. I'm genderqueer myself, but for the purposes of all of our work surveys, I usually tick female. I feel guilty if I don't try and represent in our statistics what I appear visually. I don't want our numbers to drop because the way that I view my own gender is diverse, and that's a really hard sticking point, because often when we do these employee censuses and we try and get an idea of the numbers, there are two options, maybe three. If we have greater flexibility there, it would be so much easier to be fully authentic and not have to make concessions in yourself just because you want to try and contribute to diversity in ways that are more visual.
I think that's a great point to leave it on, and I'd like to thank you all so very much for sharing your very personal experiences with us and really helping to change things. So I think we'll have a big round of applause for all of our speakers today.